We believe that these two key issues we are going to talk about this morning, if we do not address it and urgently so, the implications will be devastating for our already ailing economy. So I will invite the team lead for ACT Africa and the coordinator for the Economic Governance Platform, Mr. Abdul Karim Mohammed, to come and present for us.
Development discourse, the media, you have always been a good partner of civil society in doing this. So, as Dr. Mpabi stated, there are some key developments within our petroleum sector that civil society have thought it wise to bring to public's attention in terms of our position with specific demands that we think government must respond to immediately in order to avert any negative consequences and secure our national interests. So without much ado, I'm proceeding to read the statement. Press statement by the Alliance of Civil Society Organizations working on extractives, anti-corruption and good governance on urgent petroleum sector issues. The attention of the CSO coalition has been drawn to two significant developments in the petroleum sector, which require urgent political intervention to promote the interests of the Ghanaian people. One, the recurring controversies surrounding Aker Energy and AGM operations in Ghana. And two, the sale of 50% of Jubilee Oil Holding Limited's interest in the deep water tunnel block to Petroleum. So I will take the first issue and provide details. The recurring controversies surrounding Aker Energy and AGM operations in Ghana. Aker Energy is back in the news, trailed as usual by exhaust fumes of controversy. It is nearly 2 years since Aker tried to hoodwink Ghana through GMPC in paying $1.65 billion for shares in 2 offshore petroleum blocks. Civil society organizations in Ghana committed to accountability in the energy sector formed a coalition to block the transaction. The government and the GMPC adamantly insisted that this was a good deal for the country. Various analysts, consultants, and professors at home and abroad were lined up to circumvent the glaring evidence that based on available data, the 2 oil blocks had been ridiculously overpriced. Parliament was swayed to grant authorization to the GMPC to spend a maximum of $1.1 billion, money to be borrowed in the name of Ghana on the blocks.
Recording in progress.
CSOs were, to put it mildly, outraged by this approval that was granted by Parliament. Fast forward 2 years later, the Southwest Deep Water Tunnel has been returned to Ghana for free. The so-called massive find, that is Nyankong, that the GMPC swore it was getting for a bargain is no longer the tantalizing prospect it was sold to Parliament. What about the main block, that is the Deep Water Tunnel Cape 3 Point, where the more viable find, Pecan, is found? Well, it is now effectively controlled by AFC Equity Investment, which is a subsidiary of African Finance Corporation. That's Aker's main creditor. Aker Norway has more or less defaulted on the loan of $200 million they were given to invest in Pecan and handed over the assets in a face-saving sale for $1. Yes, $1 US. You heard right. Aker will only recoup some of its earlier investment in AFC if it succeeds in developing the field to the point where it can produce and sell oil to recoup its investment and make some money. So in short, the same blocks that barely 2 years ago were worth more than half the IMF money that this country has sweated blood for nearly a year to secure have either been abandoned or pawned for scraps. The question likely to be on the minds of the public is what happened to the $1.1 billion that GMPC was authorized by Parliament to borrow to buy stakes in Nyankom and Peka. The answer is simple. The Energy Minister, GMPC, and the bevy of bureaucrats at the various state agencies feel that they don't have to answer to anyone. And nobody can make them talk. So after nearly throwing away $1.6 billion for stuff that Ghana could simply have waited and gotten back for free, the people responsible for such reckless decision making are still taking strategic decisions for the country and refusing to account for any aspects of their stewardship. Sadly, the controversies around AKE are far from over. The sale of AKE's interest to AFC and the subsequent submission of the plan of development to the government has raised more questions. One, even though AKE has sold their interest in Ghana, they are scheming to stay on the Pecan development through surrogates and Ghanaian collaborators across segments of our society to amass ridiculous benefits from the Pecan field development. AKE Energy purchased an FPSO for $35 million. In their plan of development submitted to the government, AKE's previous owners intended to bill Ghana $1.7 billion for the FPSO. We admit that the Energy Ministry has raised a preliminary objection to the cost of the FPSO, but there is no proposal on how much the ministry considers fair value for the FPSO. Two, originally, a tanker called ST Polar Alaska, manufactured 36 years ago, was converted into an FPSO 14 years ago. Now, typically, FPSOs have an average payback period of 5 to 7 years, varying based on size and configuration. The lease period for rented option is commonly 10 years. Technocrats have expressed concern about the FPSO's age and have recommended caution, but there is political pressure to proceed with the deal. We are monitoring this keenly and demand transparency on the judgment of the ministry before the approval is granted. The CSO's campaign is a reminder of the importance of holding government accountable and ensuring that the interests of the people are protected. It is also a reminder that value for money should always be a key consideration when making decisions about public resources. Now we go on to the second subject of interest, which is the sale of 50% of Jubilee Oil Holding Limited's interest in the deep water tunnel block to Petro SA. The public may recall GMPC's acquisition of 7% stake in the sale of Anadako's interest in the Jubilee and 10 fields in 2021. For 2022 alone, the interest of JOHL raked in some $290 million, according to the 2022 PIAC annual report, even though the amount was not lodged in the Petroleum Holding Fund, which they should have as per our laws. Now, total payments for cash calls, including fields in which Explocor holds an interest, amounted to $83 million, leaving a gross margin of $207 million for GMPC and the Jubilee Oil Holding Limited. Now, these are assured risk-free revenues that should have accrued to the Petroleum Holding Fund. Now, despite the revenue potential of this interest to the state, GMPC has initiated steps to sell 50% of the of the national asset held in Cayman Islands to Petro SA, which is the national petroleum company of South Africa, in a bizarre circumstance 2 years after Anadarko sold the asset to GNPC. GNPC has already agreed to a preemption claim of Petro SA, though the Minister of Energy has written to the corporation and the President to oppose the transaction. And here I mean the President of Ghana. Given that $290 million has already accrued to JOHL, the purchase of 50% implied that Petro SA would receive a percentage of the accrued benefits, net of the purchase price and other costs, and meaning that Petro SA may not have to pay anything for that interest. We are actively monitoring the sharp political tussle for and against the sale of the asset. This situation was always possible when the government decided to domicile Ghana's assets in a tax haven and refused persistent calls to bring back the asset to Ghana. In the meantime, we wish to state emphatically that the preemption claims are illegal and those contemplating it have interest at variance with that of the state. It is unjustifiable for Petro SA to preempt the state's interest without any legal basis in the petroleum exploration and production law and the applicable petroleum agreements. Therefore, for the board chairman and the CEO to have concocted a justification for the preemption, their continuous stay in office close to any petroleum asset poses significant risk to Ghana's interest in all petroleum operations. We are concerned that the two directors of JOHL have supervised the secrecy around the company and have made no attempt to account for its revenues and expenditures. They have shown no interest and have woefully failed to operationalize any corporate governance structures, including appointing a managing director or a functional board for JOHL. Furthermore, they have made no attempt to transfer the interests of JOHL to Explocor or GNPC, as originally stated in GNPC's statement announcing the transaction. So based on these issues, we are making these demands. 1, we demand complete information on the AFC transaction and the actual amount that would constitute petroleum costs. We further demand a full audit of the expenditure of the $200 million deemed recoverable at the start of production. 2, we also demand the position of GNPC on the ACA and AFC transaction, particularly explaining why they did not preempt the sale of the asset for an upfront payment of $1, which they were willing to pay $1.3 billion upfront, which Parliament reduced to $1.1 billion in 2021. 3, we demand a disclosure of the justification to use a 14-year-old FPSO in a field with a minimum production period of 25 years. 4, we request the Norwegian government to take particular interest in the behavior of ACE in Ghana to forestall the negative image for a country that hosts a global transparency initiative, that is the EITI. You know, it is hosted in Oslo, Norway. 5, we demand the immediate removal of GNPC CEO Opoku Ahwenneɛ Dankwa and the board chairman Freddie W. Blay from their respective positions, as they have become a threat to Ghana's interest in the petroleum sector. 6, additionally, we demand the immediate transfer of JOHL and all its assets from Cayman Island and other jurisdictions to GNPC. 7, we demand immediate disclosure of the ACE plan of development from the Petroleum Commission and the government. To conclude, we firmly believe that a country micromanaged by the IMF cannot be seen to engage in fiscal recklessness that undermines its recovery. In these difficult times, the nation needs prudent management of its resources to derive the fullest benefits and bring relief to the suffering masses. Furthermore, we encourage citizens to demand accountability on the petroleum sector to ensure that our natural resources benefit all citizens of the nation. We thank you for your attention.